This is Ben Borg.
This is Katrina Borg.
This is Maggie Morgan. And this is the More Than Macros podcast.
And we are back with the podcast. To all of you listening, thank you so much for sticking with us. 2022 has been an incredible year, but we're excited to be back, sitting down, recording, and hopefully providing you guys with both some entertaining and insightful conversations. Welcome back, and please enjoy our first episode for 2022 with Chris Ackland. Good to go?
Good to go, mate.
Lovely. Believe it or not, mate, this is the first podcast of the year.
August.
Yeah, and only just August too. It's like the last week of August as well.
Easy. Well, that's terrible. Reminding me to send an email because it's last week of August. I got a lift. I've got to register for Ian Laurie. So, what's news, my friend? How has recovery been? You've actually got it. In fairness, you have a pretty legitimate reason as to why you haven't done a podcast yet. You've had
we were like towards the end of last year, like we were on a really good schedule with it. Like we were punching out, like an episode like every other week, and it was a lot of like even just a lot of me and Kat just having some back and forth and stuff like that, which was really good.
Yeah.
And then it was the new year, and then like we got COVID, and then we were down a coach. Obviously, like Claire went and pursued some other things, and then come March, like the big comeback to the footy didn't turn out the way that I anticipated it was going to turn out, and so it's been like a whirlwind of like just. I think you lose the habit more than you lose the time, and then like all the time just goes to other things, and it's just been. I've been trying to sit down and do a podcast, even with Kat, for probably 3 months.
Yeah.
And anyone who has kids probably understands when your kids go to daycare during the winter time, like they don't do a lot of going to daycare that you end up paying for.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a whole mess of things. And then even we were supposed to sit down even last week and had to reschedule. So
Yeah.
But yeah, here we are. So thank you, mate. I thought what better way to get back into the habit than sitting down with someone who is easy to chat
on the podcast more than yourself recently.
Have ya?
No, as in like on your podcast more than you are recently.
Pretty much. Oh, is this like our fourth episode or something now?
That's what I was going to ask, is that how many times has it been? Like, surely by now I'm a host.
I was going to say I should just change the name of the podcast at this point.
Yeah. Married to my tribe.
Imagine if it was, I don't reckon, maybe a couple people would just listen to you and my diatribes back and forth.
Maybe. I think if they did listen to us, it's because they don't know us, because they probably hear the same
correct
stuff every day on a daily basis.
Same story. Every time we do a podcast, I feel like we get a different angle of the Iron Tribe. And even now, it's changed again. The stairs in the background, all the stuff against the back wall, the mezzanine's in. Looks great.
Mezzanine is in, but I definitely have a bone to pick with the people who haven't put up my balustrade yet. They said they were going to do it 2 nights last week, and then I called them the 2 nights after they were supposed to be there and said, "Where are you guys?" And then they said Monday, and it's now Monday, and they're not here. So, it's my mistake. I paid my final invoice early because I wanted to claim it on tax. Which I'm still thankful that I did, but it just definitely means that to finish the job, they're in no rush to do so. They've got their cash.
Yeah.
But yes, you are correct. So it's actually the same angle from the last 2 times, but the office is sitting in the exact same spot, but beneath a mezzanine, essentially. We've had a desk change in that time as well.
Well, the wall's gone too, right?
The wall's gone, yeah. So like that kind of staircase was like pretty much on where the wall was. And we're going to keep it open. I quite like it. Like I think upstairs, I'll probably end up actually putting a similar bench to this, so that if I'm not coaching, I'm upstairs on my computer, I can still be kind of a part of it, because it feels weird having my back, and all I want to do is watch what people are doing while I'm potentially doing programming or video reviews or all that kind of fun stuff. But so we're hopefully less than a week away from the mezzanine being open. We've got some really when I put it in, it kind of solidified what I would like the place to look like within the next 5 years. I don't even care how many years, what I would like to look like eventually, right? Slowly make our way towards it. We've got some back end stuff that we need to change from a business perspective, but the mezzanine, the kind of like long-term plan would be a bunch of machines, which is, obviously CrossFit hate machines, but a bunch of machines.
Hack squat, leg press.
Well, the hack squat's up there. I'd love to get a belt squat or a leg press, and then posterior chain stuff and some upper body. Like I want to get a lat pull down seated row combo, maybe 1 or 2 of those. and then a sauna, and like really, really long term, I always would love the idea of having an ice bath or something else for recovery, so people could go back hot and cold. We have toyed and we've told a few people, but I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. We would like to have outside of hours access, but I think I want the community to be in a slightly different position before I pull that trigger, because I'm fearful that when we pull that trigger, people would spread out thinner than what they kind of already are with the groups, like the group sessions or the coach sessions that we've got. And, you know, the main reason for creating this place was so that people could train together. So I understand that people from time to time, like, it's good just to have that flexibility that they can come in at 6:30 and the coaching will go for 7. They can stick around afterwards. But I would hate to think that, you know, 4 o'clock, which we get, you know, anywhere from 5 or 6 people initially, and then it kind of gets busier as the night goes on, that 2 or 3 of those would drop off, and it just kind of changes the vibe of the place. So I would like it to be in a slightly different position. And then probably what I'll end up doing is like offering it to my shift workers first as a trial run, and then kind of going from there, because and I haven't quite figured out what we would do for the beginners yet, because obviously I think people need to probably have a coach for a certain amount of time, especially in a facility like this, before they can just use the gym willy-nilly, from an injuries perspective more so than anything else.
Would you ever, is the plan to have it set up so that you might have like someone working at the front desk from, or have the front desk man from like 9 till 7 or whatever, or not?
Don't know. Like, I think the membership base that we want, like I have started telling people, I've had it in my mind for a while. At once upon a time it was 120. Now I think it's about 100 is the sweet spot that I think I would probably close memberships at. I don't know if I would hire somebody to sit at a desk, like, unless we actually needed other systems done, which we definitely might, because, you know, it's like, you forget what it takes to manage 50 people. If you double that, all of a sudden, like, there's probably things that are probably best suited for not myself, not SARS, nor Al to be doing, and someone else who is potentially a member looking for part-time hours or something. But I don't see the benefit in it just yet. It could definitely be, but, you know, it's like, you don't know what you don't know until all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, I really need someone to be like organizing, be it the toilet rolls, organizing the paperwork that I haven't done, or, you know, all the stuff that you forget is there until it hits you in the face.
Yeah. Have you found since post-COVID, like, have you noticed that there's been an element of people that are happy to stay at home? Have most people come back into the space, a bit of both?
Yeah, look, we've had, it was really interesting. We had a couple of members who were like rocks through COVID who didn't come back. And I don't know if it was the fact that kind of held them together, or they held on to it. And then when it was time to come back, they were kind of like, you know, like you said, some of them, you know, you would have thought trained at home, but I think it got them through. And the thought of that being done again is kind of like, I don't want to even think about training, right? Like whatever. We had a bunch of new faces. It was so mixed. Like I think some people wanted a break, you know, after seeing my face on the screen for 9 months or 2 years or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden being like, oh my God, I'm sick of this guy.
He's so much worse in real life.
So much worse. He can't escape. He just talks to you the whole time. He's so annoying. So it's been interesting. You know, we obviously, our remote side picked up quite a bit, which is great. We've got, like, the remote lifters that I look after are all legends, right? Obviously, a couple of them from Blackburn and from Churnside Park and all, you know, all around the state. So that was kind of a cool aspect of it. And I'm still trying to figure out a way to actively get them involved within the 4 walls, whether it be a monthly catch up. I've talked about it for ages, but I've never really pulled the trigger on it for fear that no one would roll in and it'd be like my 21st birthday where you're like, where's everybody? I'd love to somehow get them more involved. We had a few come to Big Friday, which was sick. Like Ant, who lives down kind of Warrigal way, he's always, I mean, don't get me wrong, he comes down as often as he can. But so that was kind of a cool aspect of it, was the remote side, and people realizing that, like, I like that coach. You know, there's coaches closer to me, but I really like that person and what they do for their members. I reckon I want to give that a crack. And so that's been kind of cool. And that's been something that's probably what gives me the confidence that when we do get to 100 members, I would shut the doors, because I feel like if we're at 100 members, we're probably at 30 or 40 remote members, you know, spread amongst the coaches that we've got, because that's just kind of how it works. CrossFitters are probably the main people that we would have remotely, and they are willing to be coached and to work and to invest and to they're community focused, which is kind of exactly what we want. And they feel like they are a part of the club, even though they might visit once in a blue moon. So that's definitely something that, like, once we've got the base settled, because obviously our home, our current remote members and our home is where we want to focus most of our time and energy. But once we got to 100 members, the time we would have spent on building would be then spent on, going in a slightly different direction for the remote side at the very least. And I kind of envision that, like, we'll have our coached hours, and then outside of that, most of our time will be like, you're hiring, like, I'm changing the way that you even pay, essentially, right? Like, you're buying the coaching first and foremost. The use of the facility is the cheapest aspect of it. We don't take people on who just want to come and use the facility. We've got one person in our whole gym who doesn't get coached technically or get programmed by him. No, not me. But, like, there's just a guy who, he grew up in a weightlifting school in Kazakhstan. He's a legend of a bloke. And normally I would say no to someone like that, but he adds to the community. So he's the first member we've got who is on obviously a discounted rate, because he just literally uses the space when we're here, but he adds to it. So it's kind of like, I almost feel like he's a coach without coaching, because you're watching someone who has lifted for 20 plus years at an extremely high level lifting. It only adds. And he also, the way that he talks to people and he prepares for his lifts, like, that's a character that I want people to emulate, essentially. He first 3 weeks, he hadn't lifted in a year. First 3 weeks he was back, he was lifting an empty barbell for 3 weeks. And this is a person who, I don't know what he could snatch. I'd imagine once upon a time it was in the 40s or the 50s, and he's spending 3 weeks on an empty barbell and making it look like a toy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the direction that we're heading. And the mezzanine is kind of a part of that. It's not a necessary part of that, but the other part of that is also, like, as much as we're a weightlifting club, like, I want people to have the opportunity that post-competition our training doesn't need to look like weightlifting. I don't want to be married to this idea that you have to snatch, clean, and jerk all year round every year. CrossFit has proved that you don't necessarily need to do it. Don't get me wrong. There's times where it's really beneficial to snatch, clean, and jerk regularly in the lead up to a competition or to a specific goal. But I'd rather build athletes as a whole, and our specialty happens to be weightlifting. And we've seen that with we've got now, like, I think there's like 8 or 9 kids who are coming to us for their sports performance. And that was they wanted to do snatch, clean, and jerk to get more powerful, and now they do all their strength and conditioning here. So yeah, it's interesting. It's all evolved. Like, I still at our heart consider ourselves a weightlifting club, but same as we've always been. Like, if someone wanted just to come and do some strength stuff and hang out with people and, get a bit sweaty from time to time, come on in.
Yeah, it's probably taken me the best part of 15 years of training to realize there's, like, no one way to do it. And the best way to do it is probably take the best parts of every kind of element and put in. Like, I remember when I had that thing removed from my wrist and I had my hand in a splint, what do you call them? Like a
Splint.
a splint. That's what I was looking for like 10 weeks. So I couldn't squat at all, but you could, like, hack squat and leg press. And my back squat actually went up in the time that I was, like, not squatting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's pretty much what we want, because some of that fact that it would have gone up would have been the fact that you're not thinking about the back squat 24/7, because that's a big lift for CrossFit, right? Like, it's one of the main lifts you want to drive up. And the other part of it would have been the fact that you've taken away from psychology of it all, is you probably hit some muscles using machines that you
New stimulus. Yeah.
haven't used in a while, and you're hitting it with a far greater intensity because you're like, I cannot squat, so I might as well just push myself to complete failure on these things. And that's kind of the reason why we want these machines, is, like, there's an element of, like, post weightlifting comp, giving someone things that, like, whether they do or don't enjoy it, because I did some slightly modified training for 3 months with a predominantly powerlifting / strength coach. And after my 3 or 4 months with him, I was like, I am so excited to snatch, clean, and jerk regularly. But for a very long time in my career, I went from weightlifting cycle to weightlifting cycle to weightlifting cycle. And so that's kind of where we want to be, is that, like, if, and I have some members here who are same thing for the squat, but for the snatch, so focused on the snatch improving that they're potentially taking 2 or 3 weeks off snatching might actually make their snatch get better.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. Like you said, we want a kind of well-rounded, because one of the things we talk about is that, like, it needs to be fun at the same time. And if you do the same thing, there's not many people outside of myself and someone else that is a diehard lover of the sport of weightlifting. So often you can do the same 2 lifts before wanting to kind of gouge your eyeballs out. And then, so it's like, how as a coach can we make that more fun, more engaging, and, enough that they're improving in the lifts that they continue to come back? Because as a coach, I tell you right now, like, it just takes time. What people think and it'd be the same for the nutrition, but how long people think it takes versus how long it actually takes are two different sides of the coin. And so now it's like when we sit down and have these discussions with people, I need to figure out ways to give them wins, because their goal might be a 3-year goal. But if I sat down and told them straight, like, you're looking at 4 years, so it's like, how can I make those, small attainable goals to get them to all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I just love being here, regardless of the result. The result will come in time.
Yeah.
And that's just training in general. Everyone that compares themselves to someone else, that person probably just has far more experience, almost always.
I guess especially for your community too, where you do have such a large percentage of members who are like either super beginners or like not necessarily looking to be competitive weightlifters, just enjoy, right?
Yep. And that is, like you said, that's the majority of our members are beginners. Like the 0 to 2 years is the 2-year mark, and we've got a few in the 3 to 4 year mark, but they're probably only just starting to train now, where their training is becoming super effective, that pushing the snatch and the clean and jerk drives the snatch and the clean and jerk. But most beginners, you could take a month off snatching and just get stronger, and your snatch is going to go up. And so that's where it's like trying to teach people what training practice is and what training is. And you've actually got to do a lot of practicing how you're training in order for your training to become effective. And so then that's where we're kind of doing. And, we obviously want to do that with, if you've seen our social media, a twist of fun, because training's fun, right? At the end of the day, I know we go through dark periods where it feels like the world's collapsing on us because we're not improving. But at the end of the day, the people around you is what kind of brings you back.
For sure.
And that's the goal. Same with, I'd imagine, with every CrossFit box that's ever existed as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation in the CrossFit realm, because I think a lot of the time, even if you've been doing it for a while, your understanding or your assessment of a workout is like, well, how cooked am I at the end of it? And there's got to be some points where it's like, well, actually, the purpose of this workout is not to be lying on the floor redlined 3 minutes in.
Yeah. And we're trying to do that. We're actually starting slowly, very slowly, because you'll probably start to see some content rolling out of the benefits of cardio. But the benefits, so we're trying to get our weightlifters slightly fitter, especially the ones that haven't come from a CrossFit background, because the CrossFit ones are very easy to convince them to just do a bit of cardio, like whether it be one high intensity WOD and one longer, slow duration workout. Because some of my lifters, I feel, just aren't quite fit enough for what we want from them. And also, I don't want to create a weightlifter that's useless outside of the gym. I want to create a well-rounded person. And so it's so funny when I give somebody like, hey, you're just going to sit on the bike for 15 minutes and you're just going to breathe and you can talk to anyone. And they're like, what? What is this? Cardio? This is exactly the opposite of the reason why I'm here. And it's like, well, I know it's not necessarily going to directly help you weightlifting, but it is going to make you healthier. And if you're healthier, you're probably going to do better inside the gym. And if you've got kids or if you've got playing a sport, it's going to help, right? But it's hard. Like most people that come into either yours or my gym have come to a gym where it's like boot camp based, F45 based, where the whole goal is to flog yourself to the ground. And that's their, if I told someone it would take me 6 months of legitimate training to put 1 kilo on my snatch and haven't PB'd in 4 years, they would be like, that sounds terrible. But it's the process of it all, right? Like, can I get better the older I get, now having 2 kids, eventually 3 kids, eventually, you know what I mean? Mate.
That's the plan. Be outnumbered.
We will, in about 6 months' time, start talking about number 3, I reckon.
How old's Brandy now? 4 months?
5 months. On the 19th, yeah.
Damn.
Crazy.
How is it?
It's the best.
Yeah.
I love it. The way I explain to people, from my perspective, obviously, because every baby in every situation is different, but I should say our perspective, because I think me and Tracy have similar agreements on it.
You're already thinking about number 3. Probably the answer is yes.
Well, but also more like when you have that first child, nothing in the world can prepare you for it. Nothing. No matter what people say, nothing can prepare you for it. But when you go from 1 to 2, not much changes. Like you go from 0 to 1, your whole life has to change. Like oh shit, I didn't do enough work during the day. I'll just stay up till 11:30 at night and do my work. Like you don't have that luxury. Like you would still do it from time to time, but like at the moment, Brandy is she's not unsettled, but she doesn't go to sleep till 11 o'clock at night. I'm not starting opening my, and I have, but I would prefer not to start. So I've got to then be much more effective with your time. all that type of stuff. But it's been great. Like the difference from 1 to 2 wasn't as great as the difference from 0 to 1 was.
Yeah.
And as difficult as it can be when one goes down and the other one wakes up, and like I could imagine, especially Tracy, who's got the girls far more often than I do on her own. It's definitely, I mean, she would definitely be finding it much harder, but she's the one who's more adamant about a third than I am. I'd be happy to stop at 2, but my view is 20 years from now, I'll kick myself. I want a big dinner table with the kids and their partners and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. Can you do something to stop your camera shaking?
I'll stop moving.
I feel like I'm getting motion sickness. Yeah, that's a conversation I've been having with Kat is like, I'm pretty tired with like 1. And then like, obviously number 2 is on the cards. And then initially Kat wanted 3. I just think 3, you need to like, it doesn't scale as easily as 1 to 2. It's like, now you need like the extra bedroom. Now you need like the 7-seater, like all these kind of like the next step up in all these other areas as well. And you're outnumbered, like heavily outnumbered.
Yes. Well, that's where it's like, hopefully number 1 is a bit of a drill sergeant, and you've I feel like Scarlett's going to be hopefully hopefully helpful. But you're right. But I mean, the way I kind of look at it is, it's like I know how hard it's going to be now, and I'm not doing it for now. Like I'll enjoy the moments and I'll enjoy it all, but I know that like as I age, like I don't know, it's just something
That's what you want.
That's what we want. Yeah, essentially at this stage, right? Obviously, like shit could change. We might not be able to conceive. You don't know, right? Things change quickly. So, but no, it's exciting.
Nice, mate.
Yeah. So tell me, what was it like breaking both of your legs into 1,000 pieces and then trying to recover?
Well, to be fair, it wasn't my legs that broke, so strong bones, just not strong tendons. It's been I would rather go through COVID Melbourne lockdowns again than go through like the last 4 months again. The first 3 months were probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. First 4 weeks, even more so. And that was being locked out both legs straight in a wheelchair 24 hours a day. That was like having mum move in.
Think of anything worse.
Yeah, like needing like mum and Kat's help like every time I wanted to like go to the bathroom, like do anything, and then even going to the bathroom, like still had your legs like locked out completely straight.
No, just the thought of that is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then even just getting around, like even getting around our house, like our house is pretty open plan, but there's a difference between being in a wheelchair and being in a wheelchair with your legs 1.5 meters straight out. So I couldn't really get through half the house for the first couple of weeks. And we renovated the bathroom last year. Like initially we had the toilet in a separate room and then like a smaller bathroom with like a shower and a basin, and the shower had a lip on it, and we renovated it. We knocked the wall out, made it all one area, an open plan shower. If we hadn't done that, like I wouldn't have been able to come home. Like that's
wow.
So there's a lot of things that were like worked out well in the end. But yeah, the first like 4 weeks was easily just like the hardest thing like I've ever had to do. I couldn't even get in and out of the wheelchair on my own. So I was like, Kat would be consulting clients and I'd be trying to time medication so that I could go to the bathroom when she had a break. But if she had like 3 hours of clients, so I guess I'm sitting here like on the couch or like on the bed until like her 3 hours of clients finishes and she helped move me somewhere else.
Yeah.
But once I started getting flexion back, once I could bend my knees to 60 degrees, things got considerably easier. I could now like get into the car because I could get my legs down, and so we could go
to the house
gym.
for 4 weeks straight.
Not quite. I had a couple of mates who took me for a walk, like pushed me around, which was nice.
Yeah.
And then we went to Apollo Bay for Easter.
Oh, you're in the back of the van.
Yeah. So so we hired like a wheelchair accessible car for like the weekend.
Yeah.
And it's literally just like obviously there's a ramp and all that sort of stuff, and there's like a space in the middle, so they put you in and they pack all the luggage in around you pretty much. So it was quite nice. Like, got a pretty tight knit family, so there's definitely lots of people to like help and support, but like at the same time too, like mentally someone who's always prided myself on like how strong I am, and like physically as well. And I think the hardest part for me to comprehend was like I felt like my body had really let me down. Like I was like,
Trade you almost.
yeah, you know, I was just like, I remember going to that game and like psyching myself up and being like, you're the fittest you've ever been, you're the strongest you've ever been, like, you're not gonna break, like, get the fuck in there. And then, like, next thing I know, like, I broke, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of that kind of initially just being like, how has this happened? Like, I played footy all through my 20s and like never ate more than like a soft tissue anything.
Yeah.
And then just like for complete devastation. So there was a lot of like sitting around in the bed when you're not doing much, like you're like contemplating like literally everything, and it was like, yeah, just felt like, yeah, the how does the punishment fit the crime here? Like, how have I done such a significant injury, which has literally taken everything away? Like in terms of, I love, you know, coaching CrossFit and PTing and doing CrossFit and training, and couldn't do any of it for at least, you know, 8 to 10 weeks was dark.
Yeah. What I was going to say is like, it's a real big credit. I know this doesn't to take away that, as you mentioned, dark, but when I saw you in that van going somewhere, like, I reckon most people, and possibly even myself included, because I remember when I broke my back, I was just locked in a room for 4 weeks, right? Like, it would have been so easy to do nothing. You know what I mean? Like to sit there and I'm not going on holidays. I'm just going to wait. Like, and what that would have done. So credit to you for actually, like, whether it was you or whether it was Kat dragging you out or friends dragging you out. So credit to the people around you. But it's one of those things of like, you know what it's like, when we start feeling sorry for ourselves, it's really easy to sit still, and it's literally the worst thing that we could, because you know, I imagine the hardest part, like you said, was sitting there thinking about like nothing essentially, or how bad your body was, or this or that. Like,
I mean, it was like, I've got a lot of mates who like really like came through, like Rocky, for example. Like I needed to get to a physio appointment and we couldn't hire the disability car.
you're in a tradie van.
Yeah, so Rocky rocked up in like his plumbing van and pulled stuff out of the middle, and they just like cable tied me in and like took me down, you know, like stuff like that. Like it takes a whole village. It's I look back now and I look back at like some of the reels and stuff that I'd kind of put together, and like it's almost emotional looking back, being like, if I'd stopped and really contemplated how bad it was or how long it was going to come, I don't know that I would have made it through. But when they told me I was going to be in the wheelchair for 3 months, after like 2 weeks, I was so determined to just get out of the fucking wheelchair.
These guys wrong.
They're like, yeah, I was willing to do.
Yeah, I was saying, how far ahead of schedule were you?
So I was supposed to be in a wheelchair for 3 months and then braces and crutches for 3 months after that. So the goal was to be walking unassisted by the 6-month mark. And now the 6-month mark is end of September. So yeah, so but like, they don't know. Like worldwide, there's 5 people that have done the injury of what I've done, and typically like quad tendons in particular are like associated with like mid-50s, inactive.
That's what I was going to say. They also don't know what it's like to train someone, because like who has either the support, because obviously it would have been exponentially harder on your own, but also the drive, and then the capability of, you know, the gym being around you and things like that, to be like, I'm going to do this, right? Like,
Yeah, well, I think like I always used to be like, CrossFit, like it prepares you for life. Like training like prepares you for life. And I think more accurately, the description should be, it prepares you for when life goes wrong.
yes.
Because I think the position that I was in before getting injured has obviously played a huge part in my ability to get back. But even little things like being in the hospital and have to like change beds, but being able to like lift myself up and transfer myself across, or when I was getting in the chair, like if Kat put my legs like in the bottom of the, like where your feet go, I could use the handle to do a pull up and sit myself like in the seat. So like I've never been like happy to be strong. Like it's never been so functional, really. But yeah, man, like until probably the 4-month mark, like actually once I was up and walking, even with like the brace or the crutches, like life got significantly better. And I kind of like that there's been no case studies in terms of, oh, you might only be like most people only get back to this point, because I kind of feel like no one knows. It's up to me and how much I'm kind of willing to do.
And also that you've set a precedent.
Yeah, exactly.
You're what's possible, right? Because for all we know, the person that comes along before you, if they didn't see the light at the end of that tunnel, wouldn't have the strength to be able to go through.
Yeah.
the 4 minute mile thing, right? Like, no, it's 4 minute miles impossible. No one can do it, blah, blah, blah. The first person breaks it. And then within a week, you've got the second person breaking it. So it's like, you're the right now. If they've written down all you, which I'm assuming that's exactly what they've done. Hey, if someone the similar age, similar everything, obviously they might not necessarily be as fit, but this gives them hope, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I mean, the surgeon was pretty happy. Like I had a good, like I had, when I did it, like my wife is obviously pretty good in a crisis, but again, like leverage, like every relationship that we sort of had, that anyone that might, know someone or can help out. And so we had a recommendation for a really good surgeon. And then obviously was able to name drop like people that the surgeon knew, kind of thing. And once he heard what the injury was, because of how rare it is, he was like, yep, I'll take him, like no images, no nothing. And so kind of went from like being stuck at Maroondah, like public, which was just the closest hospital, and having no idea. They had no one working the weekends. They were like, we're not going to be able to do anything till Monday, really. So you just kind of sit here, to being like in an MRI and like in operating theater within like 24 hours of moving. Yeah. So it is very much like it's who you know, right? Like, and then having a good surgeon, obviously, like did a good job, and even from like the updates, he was pretty impressed and happy with like how the recovery was going, how much flexion I was getting. But I was also like, everyone's like, oh, make sure you do your rehab. I'm like, who doesn't do their rehab? Like, what else am I gonna do? Like, I'm sitting down like 24 hours a day. Like, at the least I can do is try to flex my knees up as long as these, braces will allow me. Right?
Yeah. So I suppose that's the difference between like yourself and some other people out there, where it can be like, if they haven't necessarily faced certain adversity before, if this is the worst thing they've faced, it can be really easy to not do the rehab.
Yeah.
You can fall into that trap of like, what's the point? And so, like, obviously credit to yourself and to what you've had happen in the past. It's like, well, I also have a kid now.
Yeah.
And I want her to see what dad goes through and what mum goes through, and that, yes, it's okay to ask for help, and yes, it's okay to say that it's hard, but don't stop.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I think like, what's the alternative? Like, what am I gonna do? Like, not get better and not get back to doing like the things that I love. And I think at one point I was like trying to set goals for myself, and I was like, look, if I never back squat 200 again, like I'm probably okay with that. But like, I want to be able to run and jump and play with Matea and do all those sorts of things as well. So the big goal at the moment is like to do the Open next year. And to do the Open RX. So, and look, I'm 5 months in, and the only two things that I'm really not doing are like jumping and running. So, yeah, like I can lunge all the way down to the ground on both knees. Like I can air squat to depth, like slowly, and it hurts, but like I can get that before. Yeah, exactly. It's probably, and all the like lateral plate step ups that I've been doing, like I might actually have pistols on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I think that we don't often talk about a lot when it comes to injury is like the physical side of injury, and especially like brutal injury is like one thing, but like the mental side we don't often talk about. And you would know, like anyone who's had significant back injuries or like recurring back injuries, you get to a point where every time you deadlift, all you're thinking about every time you approach the bar is like, oh my God, my back. And the more you kind of think like that, the more likely I think you are to actually do something, because you kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So hang on, Kat's looking for the dog. The dog's asleep at my feet. So yeah, the first time I got on the leg press with like a plate on each side, I was like, is this the moment that my knees come shooting out of the scars? And then last week was probably the first time where I actually felt like I was generating power through my legs. And that weekend, like my legs were sore, like I had DOMs in my legs, but my knees weren't. So I was like, I feel like I've taken sort of that next step now as well. So
yeah, it's a I mean, it's like everything, right? The longer I coach for, and the more people that I help or listen to or whatever, the physical part of it is the easy part of it.
Yeah.
Easier, I should say. Like mentally preparing yourself that the result might take longer than what it's going to take, or getting through whatever the hurdle is or the wall is. Like, and it's 100% the same thing for nutrition. Everybody has the capabilities to do so. It's just figuring out the solution that works for you. And who are you? Are you the person that, can you figure out a way to be healthy and to have your nutrition goals with not food prepping? For sure you can. Can you train only 2 days a week and reach your goals in the gym? Of course you can. It's accepting what is feasible within your life and then approaching it to the best of your ability. And so I always look at like certain situations, and it's like, once you've made the decision, then it's like, okay, how am I going to do the next step? And it's always the psychology of it all. Your brain always gives out way before. Same as when you ask someone how many more reps you got left in the tank, and like, oh, I reckon I got one more. And you're like, give me 7, and they get through 6. And it's like, well, that's what it feels like to physically fail, right?
Yeah, I think and
ourselves way off more often than we should.
Well, I love reading like Dave Goggins and that kind of shit. And so like a big part of me has been like, this is going to be like my origin story. Like anything I do from here, like imagine how good like the comebacks, like what if I could like run a marathon like after this, you know? And things like after they've told me like, don't run, like whatever you do, don't run on your knees. Like what if I could run a marathon?
Yeah.
And I think too, when you are physically active, you know, with CrossFit or even weightlifting, you get used to a certain element of discomfort anyway. Like when have you ever trained like completely pain-free or not had something that's like bugging you or like super tight? Like you learn to kind of like manage and put up with discomfort and keep kind of pushing through. So I'm terrified to say, like I thought after like COVID and everything else, like things might get easier. And now I'm terrified for what comes next year, but it is kind of like, well, what else can I push through or get through if I can get through like this? You know?
You've survived isolation that's been imposed on you by the government. You've survived isolation that's been put on you by
self-imposed
by the bees, and then you've done the rehab for it. So that's the thing. It's like the more victories or whatever you want to call it that you stack up, it doesn't make them easier, but it definitely puts you in a position of self-belief.
Yeah.
And that's the key to most things, is like having the optimism first and being able to then kind of be like, cool, from the optimism, it's going to build my confidence once I start seeing a little bit of a result. And then all of a sudden, you know, you get to persevere and then you kind of keep going around and around.
Yeah, long-term goal, short-term mindset, right? Like okay, there's the goal. The goal is the squat and whatever else, but it's what can I do this week, right? Like, well, okay, what can I do today? What can I get done by the next physio appointment? And just keep focusing on, especially initially, if I was really considering the fact that it was going to be an 11 or a 12-month rehab cycle, like you can't even get started. The mountain just looks so big, so incomprehensibly big that you don't take the first step. But if it's like, what can I do before the next rehab session or before I next have to go to the physio, whatever it is, you get through. And so I guess the reflection point is now taking that personal experience and putting it, we can have these big long-term goals, but like let's break it down into like bite-sized, manageable, very manageable pieces and just watch all those pieces add up over time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden
you hear people say, it's like, I don't know if it was James Smith or someone, it's like, how do I lose 50 kilos, 20 kilos? You start with 1.
Yeah.
I think, and I've been talking about this recently and some of the content I've been putting out. I've been putting out content not for anybody, but I would like, other than the people who are going through a certain thing, because I want to send it to them and be like, watch this 6-minute video I put together, then come back, let's have a conversation. And like one thing that I think people expect is they expect it to be smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And if it's not going to be smooth sailing, how much longer will this take? And what I'm telling them is like, firstly, you can't have expectations, but you can definitely, like, setbacks are going to happen. It's probably the only expectation that you can have, because it's like, as soon as you have an expectation of something, your chances of becoming discouraged go through the roof. And I think Kurt sent me a podcast the other day that I've listened to 3 times on expectations and stress. And there comes a point where once you've set the goal, you've got to let all expectations go and then just start focus on the objectives in front of you. Because if all you're thinking about is that 100 kilo snatch, the 20 kilo weight loss, whatever it is, it will probably never happen, because you're so far distance looking in the future. It's like what you said. If someone said to you, it's 12 months, I need you to only focus on 12 months from now, you're not doing the things in the short term. And then all of a sudden you end up not being able to recover, or you do recover, but your knees are never the same, or they're not the same to where they could have been had you have done the recovery rehab properly.
Well, I switched physios because I felt like the first physio I was working with, I was like, I need you to give me a program. Like, I need you to tell me this is what you have to do. This how many reps, how many sets, and it was kind of like, oh, just do a bit of this, and you can like do some of these, like blah blah blah. I'm like, no, you need to give me something. I need to feel like I'm like ticking boxes, like I'm. And in the end, it just like wasn't there. So I don't know if just we had different expectations of like where I saw myself getting to, and potentially where he did as well, but. Working with an exercise physiologist has very much been like you're training 4 days a week, you're doing this on these two sessions, this on these two sessions, you're going to progressively overload, and then we're going to review every 6 weeks and see where you're at. And that is, for me, that is like perfect. I want to write on the board, tick it off as I go through it, and um, and knock it off. So yeah, it's been look, and I always try to, whatever the experience, good or bad, I think is very contextual at the time too, and trying to like make the most of being on the other end of something like this. And like I started saying before, and now what have I learned that I can utilize in my own kind of coaching from this point. But you're right, I think it shows the significance of having those big, like maybe you want to snatch 100 kilos, but what's the plan that you're following to get there, and how much can you break it down? Because for someone like myself that's wanted to snatch 100 kilos for 2 years, and not working on my snatch hasn't helped me.
Yeah.
So it's like I got this big goal, but it's like, but what are you actually doing to kind of like get through there and progress there, and move forward, make sure you're moving in the right direction. So yeah.
Yeah, it's helping people set themselves up for success, and like educating them on like removing it, which is really difficult to do, right? It's a skill in its own right to be able to remove expectations, because it becomes that chicken or the egg situation where people are like, well, I can't remove the expectation until I'm starting to see a little bit of success.
Yeah.
And it's like the expectation that you're, that you need to hit this number. You don't need to do anything, and thinking in those terms isn't necessarily helping you. But what is good is going to be focusing on training consistently, say 3 days a week, with like extra 15 minutes of practice twice a day with a barbell or whatever it is, right? A specific weight, a specific position, like doing what you're doing, and then just adding a little bit of it. And that could be sleep. For some people, it's like I need to train more. It's like most people I end up convincing to train less.
Yes, yeah.
And then like getting them to be like, well, that extra hour that you've got, well, can you convince you to go to bed earlier? Or that extra hour that you've got, can I convince you to spend time on the phone to a friend, cultivating a relationship? Or can I get you to focus on your food for that 1 hour?
Yeah. I think sometimes the deeper conversation that we don't have around goal setting is like not just the expectations of meeting that goal, but what are the other expectations peripherally that you think achieving that goal will solve? Because, and we see this probably more often with things like weight loss. If you don't address a lot of the underlying factors that are making you feel like you want to undertake this journey or do this journey, just because you see a certain number pop up on the scale, you're not, all your other problems in life haven't automatically solved themselves because you weigh less. So if you think that achieving this goal is going to be the answer to all your problems, I've got like some really unfortunate news for you, right? Once you achieve the goal, then what? You're still miserable because you haven't dealt with any of the other factors,
Are there specific questions, or are there specific homework that you've experimented with giving clients? Like as an example, like asking someone to journal about what's the best way to do it? How would it feel if they lost the 15 kilos?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, what would it feel like to not lose the 15 kilos?
Yes, definitely. Like depending on the client, I'll have the first and foremost thing I generally do is have like prescribed reading for all my clients. Like there's probably 3 or 4 titles that I want everyone to read.
Yeah.
And that's just more so to start creating more habits, and especially with reading is good habits to build in around like bedtime and sleep hygiene and just kind of addressing like a number of different factors. But yeah, I think that kind of self-reflection, when you start to learn about like decision making, it's very important to try to get in touch with like what's subconsciously, or what are the underlying motivations for the decisions that you're making. Because if we don't address it on that level, these are just going to be decisions that you end up making again and again when you're tired or stressed or in a rush or busy or whatever else, right?
And that's the difficult part, is like educating people on who they need to become. Like if you want to be the person that like does fitness, weighs a particular, whatever it is, right? Like I don't really talk to the scales about my clients at all. But what I will talk to them about is like I know obviously weight classes, but I try not to talk to them about like when they're talking about weight loss, I'm like, well, like, how is it that you want to feel? Like, because when I did used to help people with losing weight and their nutrition and things like that, what would normally happen is someone would walk in before we would jump on the scales and do a check-in and be like, how's everything been going? I've never felt better. I'm sleeping better. My weights are going up. This is happening. This is happening. They jump on the scale. It's exactly the same. And they're like, what a waste of 4 months. And it's like, are you kidding me? What did you? And so it's like, now obviously I would probably approach it in a different light if I was to help people with that. But like you said before, like the underlying reason thing. And I think what I'm trying to do with a lot of my members these days is I'm actually asking them to go and reflect. And then like a couple of months later, we sit down and we talk about it again. And look, sometimes that involves someone actually seeking to a professional, because I'm in no way, shape or form a professional. But I know that through working with a mentor of mine, being asked those questions and actually figuring out, like he asked me, why are you a coach? And I was like, I want to help people. And he's like, yeah, but where does that come from? And I was like, because I want to help people. And then figuring out that a lot of that comes to do with, things that happened in my childhood and the support that I was given when I was a child, and wanting to be similar in those regards. It's like, it makes it so much easier to roll into work when your life's stressful, when you've had no sleep, and it kind of boosts you up to some regard, because obviously as a coach, a lot of what you do is you take other people's emotions and energy and you try to turn that around for them, and you try to give that back to them, and hopefully in a way that then challenges them to go and do good things outside of the gym. But that can leave you feeling exhausted, tired, and then you take that home, and that's this decision that we've made, and it's one of the best jobs in the world. But I tell you now, like when I'm sitting down with members, and it's a scary thing asking some people these questions. So I generally ask them in a way where it's like, I want you to go and write this down. You don't have to tell me any of these answers. Like if you would like to share it with me, I'd love to hear it. That would be great. But it's like you said, it's like the person who like is adamant that they need to do X. And it's like, that is not a motivating enough factor. And it's like, and where is that coming from? And it's like, what I start to see now is I almost start to see if somebody played a prior sport, the thing that let them down in that prior sport starts to rear its head in this sport. And it's like, okay, how can we work through that? And, why did you play that sport? Whatever it is, right? And I think it's most people just want to come and lift some weights. So it's sweet. I don't talk to those people about certain things. But if they've got specific goals and they've hit a roadblock, and it's like, well, we need, like you said, we need to figure out where this is coming from. And a lot of my members now, I'm actually starting to get them to journal. And I'm not a big one for positive journal or whatever you call it, affirmations, things like that. But I am a big one in asking questions, because I consider myself someone that can think through things quite clearly, but I am also a very quick thinker. So I make decisions really quickly. But when I'm forced to write down, being the terrible writer that I am, and write with, what I do try to do is I try to write with half decent handwriting. So it forces me to slow down even greater. Yeah. I end up finding answers to questions that I would never have found. And it's one of those things that like, don't get me wrong, there's certain situations when you're writing these things, you find some things out that you might want to not know initially. But it makes you a better person. It makes you realize certain things that you do as a knee-jerk reaction that you're like, hang on a second, I don't actually agree with that. That's not me that has that emotional reaction to X. It's coming from another place. Yeah. And when people start to realize that, like I'm just fortunate from a weight loss perspective, fortunate, quote unquote. It's probably a poor choice of words, but my knee-jerk reaction is that when I get emotional, I go within. So that negatively affects my relationships. But for somebody else's knee-jerk reaction to a poor situation, it's food. And that could come from a number of different locations. So it's like figuring out where that came from. And then the next step is putting a stop in place. Like, how do I, when this happens, put something that gives me a second opportunity to make a different decision? Yeah. And it won't always happen. But I think that answering those questions and figuring out what they are, like as a coach, one of the questions I was challenged on or was asked was like, do I consider myself? And it's like, you know what it's like. It's really easy just to spend most of your time focusing on everybody else. You don't stop to actually consider yourself in a way that is like, I'm always working towards the end goal, but what if I am where I wanted to be? Yeah. And all of a sudden in 5 years time, Iron Tribe ends and I actually didn't spend the time doing what I thought I was going to do when I was at my goal. And so nowadays I end up taking, I'm about 50 hours, 55 hours of work a week. There was a period where I was 65 to 70 hours of focused work. And then I was on my phone when I was home. And don't get me wrong, I'm still my phone flat out. But actually taking the time in the middle of the day, like I went home for an hour and a half in the middle of the day today, and just being present as best as I could while I was there. Or normally on a Friday, I could easily work till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, even though I've got a coach here, being like, no matter what point I get to, I'm going home and spending time with my family.
Yeah.
Because it's exactly where I want to be. There's other goals I want to hit too, but it's like if I don't stop to smell the roses now, and I'm always just looking ahead.
And what's the point?
What's the point?
I think probably the biggest turning point for us as a business and with our coaching methodology was before COVID, the large majority of our clients were athletes and quite athletically focused. And then what COVID kind of forced us to do, and we have a lot of Gen Pop as well. And typically what we would say is like, look, our athletes just typify what's possible, you know, and a lot of what we learn from them can still be applied on this level. But a lot of like that Gen Pop kind of conversation and work about developing, you know, a value system and things like that, and trying to get them to dig a little bit deeper about why they're trying to achieve certain things, or what they're hoping this will address and things like that. We've actually found applying that to our top level athletes has actually been more of the benefit, right, than kind of what tends to go the other way. And identity is this huge thing, because if you're, you know, and maybe that's the other lesson I've kind of learned from this whole thing with my knees, is like, without my ability to make quarterfinals for CrossFit, or to like demonstrate every movement proficiently for like a CrossFit class, whatever it is, like, well, who am I if that, you know, so what happens to, you know, someone like Pat Vellner when they no longer, you know, what happens to Matt Fraser once he's no longer the fittest on earth? Like, if that's who and why he's identified that for so long, well, then who is he without that, you know? And I think if you can solve that question first, or answer that question first, and that answer might change over time, but if he has an answer to that question first, and he is someone who also pursues that part of his life, then it gives him, it's like, yeah, it gives him his why, it gives him his reason, and whatever happens on those outcomes, it doesn't change who you are, or how you view yourself, or anything else, right?
And you see that a lot of times when professional athletes finish playing professional sport, and it's they don't know who they are, right? Yeah. And they really struggle with mental health, depression, things of that nature. And it's because they were so wrapped up for such a long period of time. Val just realized she's on the screen.
That's all right.
They realized that that's been their focus for so long that they never actually stopped to work on themselves, or like who am I outside of Iron Tribe, right? If Iron Tribe was to disappear tomorrow, it would be a very heartbreaking experience, but it is not me, right? Like, and it's a huge part of who I am, and it would be sad, but I would definitely figure some other way to help people. Yeah. And it might not be weightlifting, it might be some other regard, but there is some people, when they set a goal, the goal is there to distract from what is going on that they struggle with, right? Be it a relationship breaking up, be it, you know, whatever it is, thousands of reasons. And so it's like, you know, as coaches nowadays, obviously I'm not going to talk to everybody about this, but it's a tough thing to try to like be helping someone and be like, well, why are we working through this? Like who is the person that's sitting across from me, and do they actually want this goal? And sometimes I've convinced people that like maybe this isn't what they want, and that we need to potentially look at modifying our training. Like, if you do get to that goal, which is possible, will you be, like you said, if you lose the 20 kilos, are you going to be actually happier? Yeah. Probably not. You'll just be 20 kilos lighter and just as unsatisfied
and hungry. You're hungry. Yeah.
And you're hungry, right? And so then it's like, then what does that do to you inside? And it's like, I've done it. And so it's like, can I rectify those things first and foremost, or better yet, on the path to where I'm going? Because you might get to the point of 10 kilos lost and be like, God, I'm happy. I like the balance of being able to go out with my friends on a Friday night, have a couple of drinks, food, etc., and not have to think about things.
I think that's, you know, typically what I think the term weight loss is often used within the industry is incorrect, right? Like, I think most people would be more than happy to be heavier but leaner, which is what they're really after, right? Typically it's like an aesthetic of some description, rather than be like less aesthetic but lighter on the scale, right? Yeah. And so I think a big part of that process is, you know, constantly reviewing and analyzing and things like that, but also addressing like how appropriate the goal is in the first place. And for a lot of people, weight loss, if you dig a little bit deeper, it's like that arbitrary number has been chosen because at the last time, 10 or 15 years ago, when they didn't have 3 kids or a career, or they were, a university student that had all the time in the world to train, when they last remember feeling like super comfortable and super happy, that's just what they weighed. And it's like, all right, well, now that you have 3 kids and the career and you've been doing resistance training for the last decade, why would you still be trying to get back to that particular number? And it's more a nostalgia or a sense of feeling that they kind of have that they're trying to achieve rather than it is actually like a number on the scale. I think once you realize that as a coach, your whole approach changes, right? Yeah.
And it has to, right? It's trying to ask people the appropriate questions for them to come to the conclusions themselves. Like you could easily say, here's the equation, let's go do X, Y, Z, be it getting better, be it whatever it is, right? Feeling more energetic, right? Like removing fat loss off the table. Like I know one of the greatest satisfactions I've got as a coach is very rarely the person that is like the strongest, the heaviest, the whatever it is, right? It's the person that walked in that had no self-confidence. Like I've talked about a specific member a couple of times before. There's a girl, Lucy, who used to train with us. She was a legend, an absolute legend. When she first started with us, she was scared. She was like, she probably hate me for saying it, but she got really emotional when she was squatting a 15-kilo barbell because it just felt so difficult. I actually thought that she was going to quit. I thought, I'm never going to see this person again. And because it's like you're now emotional in front of people you don't know. All of a sudden, this is horrible. She trained with us for probably about another 14 or so months. And then when she left, because her partner, I think her partner was working in another part of Australia, she went with the partner, and then she started training on an army base on her own while being remote coached by our coach Grace. And it's like, this is a person who felt petrified to be here, who felt like an empty barbell was one of the hardest things she's ever done. And before she left, she clean and jerked 50 kilos. Yeah. It's one of the coolest stories. And I've got thousands of those, right? I remember working at CrossFit Box Hill, having someone come in and being like, oh my God, the person's, petrified to be here, and seeing them perform a pull-up a year later. Yeah. It's like, and it's so interesting to see where people come in and like the people who are just happy to be there and not putting expectations on themselves and are hopeful and optimistic from the get-go, that their potential is so high. The person that's not, the goal is to get them to that, right? Yeah. Because as soon as they become that person, there's no time frame on things. They know that it'll happen, and they know that life is just going to throw them curveballs from time to time. And when that happens, that's okay. I just modify. Yeah. I can't train 4 days a week anymore. I will now train 1 day a week. And I've asked that question to people sitting across from me before. And it's like, how would you feel if you couldn't train? And you will see people, oh, geez, they start squirming, they start moving around because the question makes them feel so uncomfortable. But like at the end of the day, like the gym is a happy place, and it is a gym that we want to go, but it's not a place that is that you have to go to, right? You can always get exercise outside of the gym. You can always be active and healthy and all that different type of stuff. But it's it's really interesting when people, so I always now challenge people when this is the way they'd like to go, and like try to find the right question for them, and then let them go and figure out what the answer is, essentially. Because it's not up to me. Because like if it was an equation of like this, say, get someone strong, everybody here would snatch 200 kilos.
Then snatching 200 would be the same as like snatching 40.
Of course, yeah. And it's your there's a mini documentary by a powerlifter who speaks really well. His name's Bryce Korchek from Calgary Barbell. He puts out phenomenal content, and he himself has been lifting for 10 plus years. So he literally is searching for that 1 kilo. And his great white buffalo is the 400 kilo deadlift. It's the thing that he's always chased.
It's so heavy.
Yeah. But like for somebody who like got to say 300 or 350, I don't know what it was, but let's say he got there quite quickly. It's just been the thing that has, whether it be injuries, whether it be business, whether it be life, something has always gotten in the way, but he's always chasing it. And I assuming from the conversations I've heard him have and the video content I've seen him produce, if he doesn't get it, yes, it's sad, but it was the act of getting it in the first place. He's not going to look back on the memory of the 400 kilos. He'll look back on the prep for the 400 kilos. And like helping people come to that realization of it's like, it's not the act of doing the movement or the weight loss. It's the act of becoming the person that had achieved that thing. That's what's going to stick with you forever. So nowadays it's like when you chat to people, it's like, depending on where they're coming from, if they're just here for a bit of a laugh, cool, come on in. There's stuff we can work on later, but asking people the appropriate questions, because as a coach, I can't tell you, and you would have it as well, where people have been stuck on what seems like a plateau for a while, and you have no idea that in their personal life, it is like they're holding on for dear life.
Yeah.
And it's, you try to help, and some people don't want, and that's fine. It's not our job, but when they seek it, always here to listen and help.
Yeah. I think it's the biggest challenge when like building a community of any kind is, someone like the member that you mentioned, like being able to create an environment where someone feels safe to try and fail, and be able to be vulnerable and things like that. Ultimately, those members that are willing to put themselves out there are going to be the members that get the most out of it, and I think that's like a big thing at Blackburn is like, we've got to make like this hour, like the best hour of like everyone's day. Like, doesn't matter if they've had a shit day at work or what's going on in their personal life. If they've made it into the gym, like putting it into to try to make sure that, it's not that it's a non-negotiable, but we don't want it to be like it's been a hell of a day or a busy day at work, I just don't have it today. But being like, the thing getting them through that busy day at work is knowing that like come 5:30, like they're going to be like with their mates and hanging out and getting some work in and enjoy themselves for that 1 hour before it's go back to the office or whatever else it is.
For sure.
Yeah.
Too easy, mate. I think we might have to call it there. I
was going to say you got a class starting at 4 or something in the sort.
9 minutes ago. So Val's the first one in, so I reckon give it 5 or 10 minutes. The rest of the crew will be here.
Easy, mate. Thank you so much. I knew that would be a good one.
Yeah.
And we'll have to catch up soon for like more than 10 minutes. It was good to see you at Matea's second birthday, but like, what do you got to spend when you're playing host? Like, you don't get a chance to really sit still.
Kat came up to have a conversation, and I'd literally just looked at my watch and been like, I have to be in Frankston in 40 minutes to play a game of basketball.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sorry, hi, bye, and then had to legitimately run. But yeah, for sure, like we've actually got space now, so when you come over, even if you were in your wheelchair, you'd fit like a glove.
And I'll have more people to help me. They go to the bathroom. Perfect.
Yeah.
Easy. Well, maybe once there's a few balustrades in the stairs and stuff. Yeah. Well, a bit more toddler friendly. Maybe we'll come down for a cruise down to.
Come down, have a lift on the Saturday, and then come for lunch afterwards.
I've been doing a lot of no foot Olympic weightlifting, mate. It's the best.
Okay. For years, mate. Do it for years.
I know, from the hang too. Lucky.
Oh, my man. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, my man. I'll speak to you soon.
I'll chat to you.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.